The moment my husband said those words, I felt something inside me snap. Not break, not shatter, snap, like a rubber band pulled too tight for too long, finally released with a violent, silent force. "I'm sorry," I said, setting down my coffee cup so carefully that it didn't make a sound against the marble countertop. "Could you repeat that?" Marcus looked up from his phone, his handsome face wearing that casual expression I'd grown to know so well over our 8 years of marriage, that look that said he'd already made a decision and considered it final. "Veronica's coming for Christmas dinner," he repeated, as if he were telling me we were having turkey instead of ham. "Her family's in Europe this year and she's all alone. I couldn't just leave her like that." Veronica, his ex-girlfriend from college, the woman whose name had floated through our marriage like a ghost, occasionally mentioned, never truly gone, always somehow present in the background of our lives. "And when exactly did you decide this?" I asked, my voice steady as still water. "He called me yesterday, we talked for a bit, and—" "Yesterday?" I nodded slowly. "You talked to your ex-girlfriend yesterday, made plans to invite her to our family Christmas dinner, and you're telling me now, 3 days before Christmas?" Marcus finally sensed something was off. He put his phone down and gave me his full attention. "Babe, come on. It's not a big deal. We dated for like 2 years in college. That was over a decade ago. Veronica and I are just friends now." Just friends. How many marriages had crumbled on those two simple words? I picked up my coffee again and took a slow sip, studying my husband's face over the rim of the cup. The face I'd loved for so long, the face I'd trusted. Does Veronica know my parents will be there? And my sister? And our children? Of course, she's excited to meet everyone. Excited to meet everyone, as if she were a new girlfriend he was bringing home, not an ex inserting herself into my family holiday. "And what about what I want, Marcus?" The question hung in the air between us. "Did it occur to you to ask me before you invited another woman to my Christmas table?" His jaw tightened, that first sign of the temper he usually kept hidden. "Your Christmas table? Last I checked, this was our house, and it's our Christmas." "A Christmas you apparently want to share with your ex." "She's alone, Elena. What was I supposed to do? Let her spend the holiday by herself in some empty apartment eating microwave meals and watching TV?" I set my coffee down again and stood up, smoothing down my dress. I had a Christmas party at my firm that evening, and I still needed to finish getting ready. "You look like you want to murder someone." I turned to find my best friend and colleague, Jessica, holding 2 glasses of champagne. She handed me one and studied my face with knowing eyes. "That bad?" "Worse." I took a long sip of champagne. "Marcus invited his ex to Christmas dinner without asking me." Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "Veronica? The Veronica? The one he—" "That's the one." "Girl." Jessica pulled me toward a quiet corner, away from the crowd. "Tell me everything." I told her about the conversation that morning, about Marcus's casual dismissal, about the way he'd made me feel like a jealous, irrational wife for having perfectly reasonable concerns. "And he's never mentioned this before?" Jessica asked. "Never talked about them reconnecting or whatever?" "He's mentioned her occasionally over the years, said they were friends on social media, liked each other's posts sometimes, but actually talking, actually making plans? This is new." Jessica was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Have you ever looked at his phone?" "What? No, we trust each other." "Do you, though?" She tilted her head. "Trust is earned, Elena, and right now your husband is doing some untrustworthy things." I wanted to argue with her, but I couldn't, because deep down, beneath the anger and the hurt, there was something else, a whisper of doubt that had been growing for months. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in the gym, the way he'd started keeping his phone face down, always locked, always close. I'd noticed. Of course I'd noticed, but I told myself I was being paranoid, that 8 years of marriage and 2 children meant something, that Marcus would never betray our family. Now I wasn't so sure. "What are you thinking?" Jessica asked. I finished my champagne and set the glass on a nearby table. "I'm thinking it's time I did some research on Veronica Hayes." That night, while Marcus slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed and went to my home office, closing the door softly behind me. I opened my laptop and typed a name into the search bar: Veronica Hayes. The first thing that came up was her social media profile. I'd seen it before, briefly, but never really looked. Now I scrolled carefully, studying every post, every photo, every comment. She was beautiful, I had to give her that. Tall and willowy, with red hair and green eyes, the kind of woman who looked elegant even in casual clothes. She worked as an interior designer, owned her own company, never married. Never married. That struck me as odd. She was 38, successful, stunning. Why had she never settled down? I scrolled further back, looking at older posts, and that's when I found it. A photo from 6 months ago. Veronica at a restaurant, smiling at the camera, with a caption that read, "Reconnecting with old friends makes the heart happy." In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was my husband. 6 months ago. He told me he was at a work dinner that night. I remembered because I had to handle bedtime alone while managing a difficult case. My hands were shaking as I scrolled further. More posts, more hints, a coffee shop check-in where Marcus's distinctive car was visible in the corner of the photo, a book recommendation for a novel I knew Marcus was reading because I'd seen it on his nightstand, a cryptic quote about second chances and fate bringing people back together. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness, my heart pounding. This wasn't just an ex he'd casually stayed in touch with. This was something more, something that had been going on for months while I was raising our children, building my career, keeping our home together. Something I needed to know the full truth about before Christmas dinner. The next morning, I called in a favor. Before I went into corporate law, I'd worked briefly as an assistant to a private investigator named Danny Russo. He was gruff, old school, and had a network of contacts that stretched across the entire city. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he answered on the second ring. "Elena Chen, never thought I'd hear from you again." "I need a favor, Danny." I figured. I could hear him lighting a cigarette. "What kind?" "I need information on someone, fast, before Christmas." "That's 2 days." "I know." There was a pause. "Send me what you have. I'll see what I can do." I spent the next hour compiling everything: Veronica's full name, her business, her social media accounts, any connection to Marcus I could find. I sent it all to Danny and then went about my day as if nothing had changed. I made breakfast for the kids. I smiled at Marcus over coffee. I talked about Christmas plans and presents and whether we should do a ham or a turkey this year. And all the while, I was watching, noticing. The way Marcus checked his phone constantly, tilting the screen away from me. The way he excused himself to take a work call, but came back with a slight smile on his face. The way he'd started wearing cologne again after years of barely bothering. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? That evening, Danny called back. "You sitting down?" I was in my car, parked outside the grocery store where I'd gone to pick up things for Christmas dinner. "Yes." "Veronica Hayes has been in contact with your husband for over a year. Not 6 months, a year. Emails, texts, calls. They've met up at least a dozen times that I can confirm." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. There's more, Danny continued. She's been telling people they're getting back together, that he's going to leave his wife after the holidays. She's already looking at apartments for them, 2-bedroom places, no room for kids. She said that? Multiple sources, her friends, her coworker. She's been bragging about it for months. I closed my eyes, letting the pain wash over me. Then I pushed it aside. There would be time for pain later. Right now, I needed to think. "What else?" Danny asked. "I want you to send me everything you have, every document, every photo, every piece of evidence, and then I'm going to handle this myself." Christmas Eve. The house was decorated beautifully. I'd made sure of that. Twinkling lights, fresh wreaths, a tree that reached the ceiling covered in ornaments my children had made over the years. It looked like the perfect family home, which made what was about to happen even more tragic. I'd spent the past day preparing. I'd talked to a lawyer, a friend from law school who specialized in family law. I'd moved money into a separate account. I'd documented everything, created backups, stored copies in 3 different locations. I wasn't going to be blindsided. I wasn't going to be the naive wife who didn't see it coming. If Marcus wanted out, if he'd already checked out of our marriage, then I was going to make sure I walked away with my children, my dignity, and everything I was entitled to. But first, I was going to give him one chance, one opportunity to come clean, to tell me the truth, to choose his family over whatever fantasy Veronica had been spinning. "You're quiet tonight," Marcus said as we finished decorating the dining room for tomorrow's dinner. "Just thinking about tomorrow, about Veronica." He stiffened slightly. "Elena, we've been over this. Have we?" I turned to face him. "Have we really? Because I feel like there's a lot you haven't told me, Marcus." "Like what?" "Like how long you've actually been in contact with her. Like how many times you've seen her this year. Like what exactly your relationship is, because friends doesn't quite seem to cover it." The color drained from his face. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Guilt, fear, the look of a man caught in a lie. "Elena, don't." I held up my hand. "Don't lie to me, not anymore. I know more than you think I do, and I'm giving you this one chance to tell me the truth." He was silent for a long moment. Then he sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." She reached out about a year ago, said she'd seen my profile, wanted to catch up. I thought it was harmless. We'd texted sometimes, met for coffee a few times. Just talking, Elena, I swear. "And?" He looked up at me, his eyes red. "And she started saying things about how she'd never stopped loving me, about how she thought we were meant to be together. I told her I was married, that I was happy, but she kept pushing, and I didn't stop talking to her." "Why?" "Because it felt good." His voice cracked. "Because she made me feel like I used to feel, before we had kids, before life got so complicated. She made me feel young and exciting and desired." He nodded, unable to look at me. "And did you sleep with her?" The silence stretched on forever. "Once," he whispered, "4 months ago. It was a mistake. I knew it was a mistake the second it happened. I've been trying to end things ever since, but she won't let go. She keeps saying if I leave her, she'll tell you, tell everyone. She's been threatening me, Elena." I should have felt devastated. I should have fallen apart. Instead, I felt something unexpected, clarity. "So you invited her to Christmas dinner because she threatened you?" I didn't know what else to do. She said if I didn't include her, she'd show up anyway. She'd make a scene, tell everyone in front of the kids. I thought if I controlled the situation, if I brought her here on my terms, I could what? Manage both your wife and your mistress at the same dinner table? She's not my... He stopped himself. "I never loved her. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been trying to fix it, but she won't let me go." I looked at my husband, this man I'd built a life with, this man who had betrayed me and then lied about it for months. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to cry, part of me wanted to throw him out of the house and never see his face again. But another part of me, the part that had made me a successful attorney, the part that knew how to strategize and wait and strike at exactly the right moment, that part had a different idea. "Okay," I said calmly. Marcus looked up, confusion written on his face. "Okay?" "But understand this." I leaned down until my face was inches from his. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you brought on yourself. Whatever consequences come from this, they're yours to bear. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let this woman destroy my family without a fight, you don't know me at all." I straightened up and walked toward the door. "What are you going to do?" Marcus called after me. I paused but didn't turn around. "I'm going to give Veronica Hayes exactly what she deserves." The children woke us at 6 a.m., bouncing on the bed in their excitement to open presents. For their sake, I put on a smile and followed them downstairs, watching as they tore into wrapping paper and squealed over their gifts. Marcus was quiet, watching me more than the children. I could see the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty. He had no idea what I was planning, and that was exactly how I wanted it. My parents arrived at noon, followed by my sister Rachel and her husband. They were all in good spirits, full of Christmas cheer and excited for the big dinner. I'd told Rachel everything the night before. She'd wanted to cancel, to confront Marcus right then, to burn his clothes on the front lawn, but I'd talked her down. "Trust me," I said. "I have a plan." By 4 p.m., the house was full of the smells of roasting turkey and baking pies. My mother was in the kitchen, adding last-minute touches to the dishes. My father was playing with the kids in the living room. Marcus was pacing by the front window, checking his watch every few minutes. At exactly 4:30, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Marcus said quickly. I followed him to the door, standing just behind him as he opened it. Veronica Hayes stood on our front porch, wearing a stunning green dress that showed off her figure, her red hair perfect, her smile radiant. She looked like she was arriving at a date, not a family dinner. "Marcus!" She moved to hug him, but I stepped forward before she could. "Veronica," I said, extending my hand. "It's Elena. It's so nice to finally meet you." She took my hand, her grip cool and brief. Her eyes swept over me, assessing, dismissive. I could almost see her thoughts. "This is who he's married to? I can take her." "Elena," she said, "Marcus has told me so much about you." "I'm sure he has," I smiled warmly. "Please come in. Let me take your coat." I helped her out of her coat, playing the perfect hostess, and led her into the living room where my family was gathered. I made introductions smoothly, my parents, my sister, the children. "And these are Emma and Jake, 7 and 5. Veronica barely glanced at them. "How sweet." I saw Rachel's eyes narrow at the dismissal, but she said nothing. We all knew our parts. Dinner was served at 6 p.m. I'd arranged the seating carefully. Veronica across from me, Marcus at the head of the table, my parents and Rachel flanking me on either side. The children ate in the kitchen with cartoons, which was just as well. They didn't need to see what was coming. For the first hour, everything was perfectly civil. We talked about weather, holidays, Veronica's interior divine work. She was charming, I had to admit. Quick with a laugh, skilled at redirecting conversations toward herself. She told stories that somehow always ended with her being the hero, the victim, or both. And through it all, she kept touching Marcus, a hand on his arm when she laughed, a brush of her fingers when passing a dish. A smile meant only for him, intimate and knowing. I watched it all, and I waited. After the main course was cleared and before dessert was served, I stood up and clinked my glass. "I'd like to make a toast," I said. Everyone looked at me, my parents curious, Rachel tense with anticipation, Marcus nervous, Veronica smug with the certainty that she'd already won. "To family," I began. "To the people who stand by us, who support us, who tell us the truth even when it's hard to hear." I looked directly at Veronica. "And to honesty, because secrets have a way of coming out, don't they?" Veronica smiled, faltered just slightly. "Marcus and I have been married for 8 years," I continued. 8 years of building a life together, raising children together, facing challenges together. And recently we faced a new challenge, one I think deserves to be discussed openly among family. "Elena," Marcus started, his face pale. "No, sweetheart, let me finish." I turned to Veronica. "You see, I know who you are. I know what you've done, not just to my marriage, but to others, 2 other marriages, in fact. Did you think no one would ever connect the dots?" Veronica's expression shifted from smug to wary. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. "David Morrison, 3 years ago. You pursued him for 6 months, convinced him his wife didn't understand him. When his wife found out, the divorce was messy, ugly. He lost custody of his kids, his house, and you walked away with a settlement for emotional damages because he'd promised to leave his wife for you and didn't follow through quickly enough." The table had gone silent. Veronica's face was white. "Then there was Michael Chen, no relation to me, ironically. 2 years ago. Same pattern, lonely married man, attentive ex who just wanted to be friends. You pushed him to leave his wife, and when the divorce was final, you sued him for half of everything because he'd promised you a future together. He's still paying off the debt." "Those are lies," Veronica said, but her voice shook. "Are they?" I spread the papers on the table. "Court documents, testimony, financial records, it's all here. You're not just a woman reconnecting with an old flame, Veronica. You're a con artist. You target married men, you exploit their weaknesses, and then you profit from the destruction of their families." I looked at Marcus. "Did she ask you for money? Help with her business maybe? A loan she'd definitely pay back?" Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. His silence was answer enough. "How much?" 30,000, he whispered. "For her business. She said she'd pay it back when things turned around." "Let me guess. Things never turned around and now she needs more. Or maybe she was going to wait until you left me, help herself to half of our assets through whatever legal loopholes she could exploit." Veronica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "Actually, you do." Rachel spoke for the first time, her voice cold. "Because if you leave now, Elena will file a civil suit against you for fraud, and she'll win. She always wins." "You can't prove anything," I interrupted. "I have witnesses, I have documentation, I have evidence of your pattern of behavior, and I have the contact information for David Morrison and Michael Chen, both of whom are very interested in telling their stories to anyone who will listen." Veronica looked around the table, seeing no allies. Even Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice bitter. "I want you to leave. Leave this house, leave this city, leave my husband alone. I want a signed statement admitting to your relationship with Marcus and your pattern of targeting married men, and I want every penny of that $30,000 returned." "I don't have." "Sell something. Figure it out." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You have 30 days. If I don't have the money and the statement by then, I file suit. And I promise you, Veronica, the exposure alone will destroy whatever's left of your reputation and your business." Veronica grabbed her coat from the closet, her movements jerky and angry. At the door, she turned back, her eyes blazing. You think you've won. He still cheated on you. He still chose me, even if it was just for a moment. You can't erase that. No, I agreed, I can't. But I can choose what happens next, and that's a power you'll never have. She slammed the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. After Veronica left, my parents quietly took the children upstairs for a special Christmas movie night, leaving Marcus, Rachel, and me alone in the dining room. Marcus sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I wasn't sure if he was crying, but I found that I didn't much care. "Elena," he finally said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was weak, and I was stupid, and You what?" I cut in. "You threw away 8 years of marriage for attention from a woman who was using you? You risked our children's stability for a fantasy? You gave $30,000 of our money to a con artist?" "Yes," his voice was broken. "All of that, and I don't have any excuse. I don't have anything except that I love you. I've always loved you. She was a mistake, the worst mistake of my life." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow that had started to fall. It was beautiful, soft and white and peaceful, so different from what was happening inside this house. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked quietly. "It's not the affair. It's not even the money. It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. When she started threatening you, when things got out of control, you chose to protect yourself instead of confiding in your wife. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone, your colleagues who probably knew, your friends, anyone who saw you together. I was ashamed. You should have been, but shame doesn't excuse cowardice, Marcus." Rachel stood up. "I'm going to check on the kids. Elena, whatever you decide, I support you." She left, and Marcus and I were alone. He stood and crossed to where I was standing, stopping a few feet away as if unsure whether he had the right to come closer. "What happens now?" he asked. I turned to face him. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not filing for divorce tonight. I'm not kicking you out of the house, but things are going to change, Marcus, radically. You're going to start therapy, individual and couples if I decide I'm willing. You're going to be completely transparent about everything, your phone, your email, your schedule. There will be no more secrets, no more lies, no more private relationships I don't know about." "Okay. And if you ever do something like this again, if you ever betray my trust in any way, I will end this marriage so fast your head will spin. I will take the kids, the house, and every asset I can get my hands on. I am very good at my job, Marcus, and if you force me to use those skills against you, you will lose." "I understand." I studied his face, looking for sincerity, for genuine remorse. I wanted to believe it was there. I wanted to believe that our marriage could survive this, that we could rebuild something from the wreckage. But I also knew that trust, once broken, takes years to repair, and I wasn't sure I had years of patience left. "One more thing," I said. "Anything. The $30,000, you're going to get it back from her, all of it. And until you do, it comes out of your personal accounts, not our joint savings, not the kids' college funds, yours." Marcus nodded, his expression resolute. "I'll get it back, I promise." "We'll see." I walked past him toward the stairs, then paused at the bottom. "Merry Christmas, Marcus." It was perhaps the saddest Merry Christmas I'd ever said. Summer sunshine poured through the windows of my office as I finished reviewing the final paperwork. Veronica Hayes had paid back every cent of the $30,000, liquidating assets and taking out loans to do so. She'd also provided a signed statement admitting to the affair and her pattern of behavior with married men. True to her word, or perhaps motivated by fear, she'd left the city. Last I heard, she'd relocated to another state, trying to rebuild her interior design business far from anyone who knew her history. As for Marcus and me, we were still together, barely some days, but still together. Therapy was helping. The transparency I demanded was slowly rebuilding trust. Marcus was genuinely committed to change. I could see it in the way he came home from work on time now, in the way he showed me his phone without being asked, in the way he looked at me with something that resembled the love we'd shared before all of this. Was it the same as before? No. Would it ever be? I didn't know. But I'd learned something important through all of this. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought. I'd learned that I could face betrayal and chaos and come out the other side not just surviving, but victorious. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by whether my husband remained faithful. It was determined by how I responded when he didn't. The children were happy. That was what mattered most. They didn't know about the affair, or about the threats, or about any of it. They knew only that Mommy and Daddy had been going to a special doctor who helped families talk to each other better, and that was true enough. Would I ever fully forgive Marcus? I wasn't sure. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination, and I was still walking that path. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never again be the woman who didn't see the signs, who trusted blindly, who allowed someone else's choices to destroy her world. I was Elena Chen, partner at Hamilton and Associates, mother of 2, survivor. And if anyone ever tried to come for my family again, they'd find out exactly what I was capable of. Looking back on that Christmas, the confrontation, the revelation, the aftermath, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd reacted differently, if I'd screamed and cried and thrown Marcus out immediately, if I'd crumbled instead of strategized. Maybe the outcome would have been the same. Maybe Marcus would have found his way back to me regardless, or maybe Veronica would have won and I'd be signing divorce papers instead of anniversary cards. But I don't regret how I handled it. I don't regret taking control of the situation instead of letting it control me. I don't regret showing Veronica and Marcus and myself that I wasn't someone who could be manipulated, deceived, or discarded. Christmas dinner that year didn't go the way anyone expected. My husband had invited his ex, thinking he was managing an impossible situation. He had no idea what was coming next, and neither did she.